Now onto our panel who are here, as indeed they are every night, to chew over the day's news. It's Tuesday, so joining me in the studio is the Labour MP for Slough, Elsie. Fresh from Westminster is talkTV's political editor, Kate McCann. Also fresh in from SW1, The Sun's deputy political editor, Kate Ferguson. Welcome, folks. Good to see you. Let's get on to our top story of the night, then. We're talking about the windfall tax. Now, this is after BP announcing these massive, massive profits today. Down Street ruling out a windfall tax this morning, premised to potentially open the door in the last hour or so to one of them. £5 billion worth of profit BP have made, and that's almost entirely off the back of high oil and gas prices. So, is it time to start taxing companies getting rich from the cost of living crisis? Kate Ferguson.
I think these profits are eye-watering, aren't they? And most Brits will think, God, they're making that much profit. Surely we can tax them a bit more. It's interesting, Boris Johnson has so far mainly come out against this windfall tax, although Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, seemed to open the door the other week, didn't he? But if you ask me, this would be quite a good move for Boris to toy with. He needs to start looking at the cost of living crisis and have things he can point to which shows I'm doing A, B, C, and it might not solve all your problems, but I'm doing something he can declare to voters on the doorstep. And, you know, it's got the populist touch, so why not?
Tan, the argument against all these things has always been it's going to deter investment. If you start taxing companies, they'll just take their money abroad.
Well, I think that's a red herring. What we need to be doing at this point in time, when the likes of the BP have recorded the highest quarterly tax for over a decade, we need to make sure that we are tackling the key issue on the ground, the likes of myself are seeing on the doorstep in Slough and elsewhere, which is the cost of living crisis. So rather than backing big business, the government should be taxing them with a windfall tax and reducing its taxation on hard-working people.
Great. You know what the argument is, though? You put tax on companies, they don't have to stay in the UK. They can offshore. A lot of companies have done that under previous Labour governments, has been said.
Well, look, a windfall tax is not the first time, Tom, that will be done, whether that was under the Margaret Thatcher government, whether it was under Tony Blair. I don't think companies are going anywhere because they want to operate within the UK. What the key thing that we've got is the only way that the companies will actually be selling their products is if people have got money in their pockets. If they can't pay their bills, if they cannot make ends meet, as many people are saying that they're having to make the choice between eating and heating. And there was this example, for example, of an elderly lady who had to go around on a bus just because she couldn't pay her heating bill. So that's why she used her pass in order to stay on a bus most of the day. That's what people are going through, so we need to help them out at this point in time.
Kate M, as I need to call you, with Kate F to your right. Unplug, will you, for this weird thing going on today where quite clearly the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has floated the idea as maybe not a bad thing. Kwasi Kwarteng, the Business Secretary, is definitely opposed to the idea. And Boris Johnson's sort of wafting between them from one side to the other, not seem to quite make his mind up.
Yeah, I think the problem here is that gap that we were talking about before, Tom, between what politicians are able to say in public and the vast sums of money that they announce, which, you know, they are big sums of money, and the reality on the ground. People aren't feeling it. And when what politicians are saying doesn't actually translate into people's everyday lives, they either think they're being lied to or they think the government doesn't have an answer. And that's a problem that Boris Johnson understands. He's a really good politician. He totally gets what's happening, which is why in interviews today, he hasn't been able to provide a real response to that problem. And actually, he's shifted throughout the day to talk about, you know, employing compassion and thinking about this very carefully. The reality of a windfall tax, it's a one-off tax. It's actually quite hard to argue against, Labour would suggest, because it's a tax on profits that companies didn't expect. It's been done in Spain and Italy. Gordon Brown's done it before. There is an argument to suggest if you're making £4.9 billion in the first 3 months of the year as underlying profit, that actually there is a reason for the government to try and claw back some of this. The argument about investment has been disproven by BP's own chief exec, who says that they would still invest, and offshoring is not very likely if it's a short-term tax. So I think the arguments mount up on one side. The problem is the Tories are ideologically opposed to doing it, and Boris Johnson doesn't want to shift that because he's afraid of what would happen to his base.
Yeah, the BP chief executive saying that today, that the £18 billion they're currently planning to invest, they wouldn't take a penny of it away. Kate F.
I was going to say, the investors are having to pay more tax next year, aren't we? Nix is going up for the rest of us. So it feels like partly a fairness issue.
Yeah,
all right.
I fully agree with Kate.
God,
there's harmony breaking out.
Breaking out in a horrific group. This is not the point of a panel at all. I'll just give you a quick list of all the windfall taxes down the age. Geoffrey Howe introduced one in 1981, a budget levy on banks, taking 2% off banks' account deposits. Margaret Thatcher won very same time around the 1980s, early 80s, special tax on North Sea oil. There was an energy tax. Gordon Brown, the famous one, just as New Labour came into power, Windfall on water, telecoms and energy companies. And then George Osborne, a bank levy of 0.05% on all banks' balance sheets. So, Kate, if you kind of add all this up, it's kind of the Tories who do this more than Labour.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think it's a huge problem ideologically for the Tories to do this once off. You can still be kind of a low-tax party. I think that the Tories might be a bit reluctant to give the win to Labour. Obviously, you've been banging the drum for it, and they might not really want to do that. And at the moment, rather than go down this route, we've obviously seen the business set quasi-Kwarteng write to energy companies and saying, well, look, if we don't see the investment that you're promising, you won't get any more contracts from us. So they're trying to exert influence in other ways.
All right, I want to move on to the next topic. Now, this is Beergate. You've heard of Partygate. This is all about Keir Starmer. Pressure's growing on the Labour leader. Spotted on camera drinking beer with activists in the run-up to the Hartlepool by-election last April. Now, Durham Police did investigate all this and said no case to answer. A lot more questions have since emerged, though. Tories obviously working very hard to put this up there with Partygate, with their own problems in Downing Street, with, of course, local elections coming up on Thursday. Tan, does Keir Starmer still have a case to answer over Beergate?
Well, Tom, these are complete diversionary deflection tactics. The police, as you rightly said, came to a clear conclusion. There was no party, no rules were broken. I'll tell you what the real story is. The real story is that Boris Johnson has been caught lying to the British public. He's been caught misleading Parliament, and therefore he needs to go. People need to be held to account. So many of us, including me, I feel like such a numpty. I didn't even attend my grandmother's funeral when she was breathing her last moment because I followed government guidance. And I feel also foolish for not having attended my lovely uncle's funeral, instead watching it on Zoom because I was worried about the number of people that would be attending the funeral and because of those restrictions. So that's what the real story is. And, you know, all this thing about this Beergate, look, parties we know were held in Downing Street, endless parties, including not one but two, on the night before the Queen had to sit all alone at her husband Prince Philip's funeral.
Tan, I'm sorry about losses. I do want to talk about Beergate, though. We spent a long time talking about Partygate. Kate Ferguson, your view?
I think that this is obviously the worst headline for Keir to have this week, the week of the local elections. He has hammered Boris Johnson, many will say quite rightly, on Partygate. So it kind of means that he has quite high standards to answer for himself. I think that Keir has questions to answer on this. And actually, he's been quite defensive in his interviews this morning. He was on the BBC maybe being a bit too defensive. If he has sort of nothing to hide, I think he should more bullishly answer the questions. You know, they are things like how many people were there, how late did that go on for, has he spoken to the police about the investigation, would he cooperate with the investigation? I think if there's nothing to hide there, then he should be more bullish in his defence.
All right, I mean, there's a long list of questions. How many people were there in total? Why did he mislead about Andrew Rayner's presence? Why did he need to work up 10 p.m? Folks, I want to squeeze in one more quick topic. And Kate M, you start this one because I didn't give you a chance to talk about the last one. It has emerged that 2/3 of all parents say they are too embarrassed to read to their children a bedtime story. So it doesn't happen. This is a new poll carried out by Aldi, the supermarket. 64% say they feel conscious and awkward. 27% say they can't express the story dramatically enough to hold their youngsters' attention. Your reaction to that? Pretty sad, isn't it?
I think it is sad. I don't have my own children yet, but I do have lots of nephews and adopted nieces and other people's children, and I am known as Bad Auntie because I like to buy them this book, which is called You Choose, and if no one's heard of You Choose, then go out and look for it. It's a book that allows kids to basically go on their own imaginative adventure, and it takes ages to read, which is why I love it, because parents hate it. I think it's really sad. You know, my dad used to make up stories for us, so maybe people should, instead of read...
Tan, the final word to you. What has gone wrong when parents can't read to their kids anymore? Some people might say they're really busy, they're exhausted at night.
Yeah, I was perplexed and astonished at that finding. It's something different, you know, when the likes of myself, I've got a teenage son, and I would find it awkward reading him a bedtime story because I think he would think that's not so cool. But for, you know, for younger children, for somebody to be self-conscious and so forth or feel awkward, I don't think that should be the case because our children, if they get that reading skill from a young age, that will increase their self-confidence, it will boost their self-esteem as well.
Okay. And it's crucial for literacy as well. All the studies have proved that. Tan, thanks.